So how do you beat a chess genius? Well, one option is to be a genius yourself. For most of us, however, that is not really an option. Okay, then what can we do? Well, one strategy is to learn about what is called positional chess. That is the value of pieces depending on any given position. And then try to keep it simple and play slowly for a simple position where you have a clear plan for what you want to do. And I have picked a game to illustrate this, because when we just say it, you just put it in words, it can sound lofty and abstract, but it actually can be very concrete. So this game is between Grandmasters Hikaru Nakamura and Simon Williams, also known as the Ginger GM. In one corner we see Hikaru Nakamura, who is universally acknowledged to be the fastest player ever to play the game. His peak chess rating put him at number 2 in the world. He is currently rated number 5 in the world. He is 4 times American champion. And he plays in a swashbuckling, aggressive style that is just beautiful to watch. He's very popular with the spectators. He has these whirlwind attacks that just seems to come out of nowhere and just crush his opponents. In the other corner we see Grandmaster Simon Williams, an English GM, who is a bit more human. He is rated about 2500, where Hikaru Nakamura is rated about 2800. Simon Williams is a prolific chess author. He has written books on different openings. The Dutch is one of his favorites. He has made DVDs. And in this game, he encountered Hikaru Nakamura on chess.com, where I also play. Isn't that fantastic, you know? It's not like if you play soccer or football, as we call it where I come from, you can't just, go down on the street and then play with Messi. But Hikaru Nakamura actually plays on the same site that I do. Alright, first let's take a look at a situation just to illustrate just how blindingly fast Nakamura calculates. So, in order to show you just how good this guy is, I will be showing you the last part of a game he played against the French number 1 player, who is currently in the top 10 in the world. So he is what we call a super grandmaster. And Hikaru Nakamura has the black pieces, and the Frenchman Maxime Vachier-Lagrave has the white pieces. And let's just start out by getting to grips with what's going on in this position. So this is Hikaru's king. He then has these weird scattered pawns that doesn't really seem to make too much sense. His king is very open. You can see there is no pawns protecting it. But his in turn for these so-called structural weaknesses, he really has some dynamic compensation. So if you look at his pieces, we have this knight ready to attack some important squares very close to Maxime Vachier-Lagrange's king, and it is supported by this rook. It's also bearing down. Lastly, in the we have this bishop here, and it seems like it's far removed from everything, but really it attacks this square, which is crucial to what happens. Absolutely crucial. Okay, so we also have this rook, and this rook it's a little out of play. It is of course on an open file, and it's not a bad piece, but it doesn't really play a role in the specific combination that I'm going to show you. The queen, however, does. And you can see the queen is on her starting square, and it looks like she's way less dynamic than the rest of the pieces. But she does one very important thing. She attacks this rook. Now the rook, of course, is defended by this knight, so it doesn't look like it's such a big deal, but it really is, because in this position Hikaru captured the rook like this, and this is a queen sacrifice, because obviously Maxime Vachier-Lagrange, or MVL as he is known in chess circles, just recaptured. But he's lost now, because Hikaru has this clever little move with the knight. And what's happening here is that the knight goes here and puts a check to the king. Now, can the pawn take? No, because it is pinned to the king by the rook. So if the pawn took, we could take the king, which is of course illegal. So the pawn is not allowed to capture. And remember that the king cannot go to this square because of this bishop. It also cannot go to this square because of the knight. So there is only one legal move, and that is to go here. And now Hikaru played pawn takes pawn. And do you know what we call that? That's checkmate. Because it's check from the pawn, and the king can't go here or here because the knight is covering these squares. It also cannot take the pawn because the pawn is protected by the knight. So the only piece on the board not involved in this combination is this rook. Every other piece plays a part, including the queen, that if we go back to the original position, had to take the rook first, because the rook crucially defends this square. It's such a small detail, but if we try the combination without taking the rook first, then we will just take the knight. So we take the rook first like this. Now the rook is not protecting the square, so now when he recaptures we have this check. Okay, so if you are not yet really impressed by this, I should say that this game is a bullet game, meaning that each player had exactly 1 minute on the clock to make all of their moves. If they run out of time, they lose the game. Now, from a position like the original one here, how long do you think you would need to figure out that you could sacrifice the queen like this? We know exactly how long Hikaru used, and I'm going to show you now. Okay, so here we are. This is the 8th game in their bullet match, and as you can see, Hikaru is leading 5-2, and as you also can see, they have 1 minute each. And I will be playing the game now. Do not beat yourself up if you can't follow what's going on. These guys are super geniuses, but I just wanted to give you a sense of just how quickly Hikaru thinks. So I'll be starting the video now, and as you can see, they move really quickly. They are developing their pieces, so even the Super Grandmasters, they play according to the sound principles most of the time. And as you can see, some of the pieces are getting to the place that you know the king is where you saw him in the diagram at the start, and now both of the rooks are, and the queen as well, and we are getting very close now. Now the bishop is in the position as well, and the knight is in position now. Now the rook is in position. The pawn is advancing, and here it is. Boom. And that is checkmate. Okay, I just want to emphasize just how quickly that happened. So I will be finding the place. Now, Hikaru, and by the way, the queen sacrifice is the only move that wins. That's important. Every other move loses. Okay? Every other move loses. So let's see how long he actually used to figure it out after rook takes bishop. Okay, let's see that again. That is 0.4 second. 0.4 second. That is insane. I mean, can you imagine having a brain that can do that kind of stuff? So now we know what kind of opponent Simon Williams is facing. Now let's go and take a look at their game. And here we are at the game between Hikaru Nakamura as black and Simon Williams, the ginger GM, as white. And this is a 3-minute game played on chess.com, where I also play. So the ginger GM opens up with pawn to d4, and if you've seen some of my other videos, you'll know that this is the move I also play. Hikaru answers in kind, d5, and we see the Queen's Gambit. This is one of the absolute most popular openings in chess. It has been played at the World Championship level for as long as there has been World Championships. This is the Queen's Gambit declined, and it's called like that because black does not accept the pawn. He could have taken this pawn. He instead declines and just protects his own pawn like this. Now we see sensible development, and as you know, we develop the knights before the bishops unless we have a very good reason not to. And here we see the semi-Slav, indicated by this move c6. Now Simon Williams is actually a prolific chess writer, and he has done a DVD, I believe 10-hour DVD on his next move here. So he has this website, gingergm.com, where you can buy his books and DVDs, and he has made like a substantial DVD on this move. So of course he knows what this is about, but he is playing against Hikaru Nakamura. So Hikaru plays a rare move. Now the position before this bishop b4 move was very, very common. Almost 3,000 games in the database played by Grandmasters in this opening. But this is kind of rare with this bishop b4, and only about 500-600 games. Now we see bishop to d3, and this is clear. We are protecting this pawn because it is no longer protected, since this knight cannot capture because it's pinned to the king like this. Alright, the pawn is captured, the bishop recaptures. Very sensible, very kind of easy to understand chess, and that is actually going to be a theme. And I will expand upon this as we go along. Now the knight is developed. As you can see, it is developed with tempo, meaning that it enters the battlefield and it already attacks something. So it forces Simon's hand. Simon has to move the bishop, and he moves it back to c2 now. This makes way for the queen, because if he had put the bishop here, of course this pawn would not be protected because it would be blocked. Now we see c5 immediately challenging the center, and at this point we are almost completely out of theory. There are like 2 or 3 games with this position been played before, and after the pawn is protected and we see this knight coming into play, we have a completely original position. This has not been seen in Grandmaster practice ever before. The pawn is protected by the bishop, and as you can see, there's quite a lot of tension being built up in the center. This is how real chess players play chess. They develop the pieces, try to do it in concert, trying to establish dominance in the center, and whoever gets the advantage will be a result of who manages to stake the strongest claim in the center. Usually, like, of course, to every rule there are exceptions. Now the tension is resolved and we see exchanges, and now very sensibly the last minor piece of black is being developed. It looks a little bit artificial, but the bishop is headed to this diagonal, and probably white's king will castle here. The bishop will be very effective. We see white castling already, and in comes the knight, because it stands to reason that if the bishop wants to be here, the knight can't also occupy that square. So we see more pieces coming off the board, and still we are like in the territory of simple chess. Pieces are being developed. We are trying to stake a claim in the center. We are slowly improving the position for both sides. And we are not, and this is important, we are not seeing crazy tactics. We are not seeing pieces everywhere. And this is a strategic goal by Simon Williams. And this is because, as we have established, Hikaru Nakamura calculates blindingly fast. So if there is a position where there are many possibilities, then Simon Williams understands that he will miss some small tactic somewhere. Maybe Hikaru can sacrifice his queen for mate in 5 or something like that, as we have seen him do. And because Simon Williams is human, kind of human, like he is a grandmaster, but compared to Hikaru he is a human, he can make mistakes. So he is trying to keep it simple. He's trying to have a position that does not require him to calculate tons and tons of variation all the time, but instead have like a small, clear, strategical goal that he can work on move by move. And when we see the bishop comes to the diagonal, as we have discussed, now there is a possibility for a queen exchange. And when the queens come off the board, the risk of being checkmated is greatly reduced for both sides. Queens generate tactics. When the queens go off the board, the game usually, but remember, to every single rule in chess there are exceptions. Always. But here, and this actually benefits Simon because he has the strategy of trying to keep it simple. He does not exchange the queens right away, though instead he improves his knight first, and when the knight is kicked like this, he then exchanges queens. Now I have a little quiz for you. This is of course check to the king. Should Hikaru capture the queen with the king or with the rook? Alright, he should of course recapture with the rook, because if he captures with the king he loses his right to castle, because the king would have moved. If you are uncertain about the rules of castling, I have made a video. You can click here and see my video with like all the rules of castling and the purpose of castling and so on and so forth. Also, on this square the rook wasn't doing much, but now it is on this nice open file. So Simon had to, sacrifice a little bit in order to get the queens off. Now the knight was of course attacked. It comes back. It is in the center, and it is kind of effective. It is attacking this bishop, for instance, and it's a pretty good place for the knight. The bishop does not want to be exchanged for a knight, but it is okay with being exchanged for a bishop. This is because Hikaru does not want Simon Williams to have the bishop pair, because if one player has both bishops and the other player only has one, the player who has, let's say he has in this situation a light square bishop and black doesn't have a light square bishop, it means that this light square bishop doesn't have a counterpart, so it becomes much stronger. But when the exchange is like this, both bishops have a counterpart and the position is still balanced. Notice that the tension in the center with the pawns has been greatly reduced and the queens have been exchanged off. The position is about level. Now the rook is improved. It counterbalances the other rook, and the knight retreats. We see a second rook improvement, and now we are at a point where white has placed all of his pieces on optimal squares. You see, now the knight comes back. This means that Hikaru admits that his knight retreat was a mistake, and this really should encourage white. It really means that white is doing something right here. It also means that there is no clear plan of attack for black. I'm not saying that white is winning. I'm not even saying that white is much better. White is slightly better in this position. Nothing that will have too much of an impact, certainly not in a long game, but this is a blitz game, 3 minutes, so mistakes can and will occur. A question is being asked of the bishop. Are you really going to stay on that diagonal? The bishop drops back, attacks the knight. And what we see here is not only about kicking this bishop around, it is also about advancing these pawns in general. And why would white want to do that? Well, that is because we see here are 2 black pawns and we have 3 white pawns. Then there are a file with absolutely no pawns on it, and over here we have 4 pawns to 3 pawns. So why is this important? Well, in chess we talk about pawn islands, and a pawn island is like a pile of pawns that are able to protect one another. So if this pawn moves forwards, it's protected by this. And if you have a majority on one side, like white has on this side, there is a chance that you can break through with one of them by exchanging maybe this one for this one and this one for this one maybe. And then you will have this one, and then you can make a new queen. So black will eventually be trying to advance his pawns over at this side of the board, while white will try to do it on this side of the board. The bishop is exchanged for the knight, and we see black slowly preparing to advance his pawns. Also, this move blocks this bishop. A question is being put to the knight: please go away. And the knight returns to d6 for the 3rd time. We are attacking the rook. The rook moves, and we are slowly trying to advance with the pawns because we want to make a queen. As an answer to this advance of pawns on the king side, Hikaru starts his own advance on the queen side. So this is very thematic. Each player is trying to advance their pawns in order to create a passed pawn. If you've seen any of my other chess videos, you'll notice that I don't explain a lot of tactics in this one. Usually I will at key moments explain, why can't you take the knight in this position, or there is maybe a back rank checkmate possibility. And why am I not doing this in this video? Well, actually there aren't really any tactics to be aware of, and this is by design. Williams is, as I've stated before, trying to keep the game simple. He's trying to steer the game into an area where he has a chance, where he can utilize his chess understanding without being out-calculated. And this is why chess is not just a game about calculating or knowing a lot of principles. It is also a game that requires that you know yourself. The world champion, former world champion Vladimir Kramnik, once said that in order to be a very good chess player, you will have to have three qualities. You will have to have a very strong work ethic, you must hate to lose, and you must be a master psychologist. And the last one is about knowing your opponent, knowing what kind of positions they play well and what kind of positions they don't play as well. And it is also about knowing yourself, knowing your own limitations, knowing your strengths, knowing how to work on those strengths, work on those weaknesses, and make it all come together in concert when playing an opponent in a chess game. And this is exactly what Williams is doing here. Okay, we see king f2. He is trying to improve his king because we are in the endgame, and in the endgame the king becomes a fighting piece, and if you have an inactive king, then you are like playing down a piece. So king f2, h4, and now we see the break. The knight moves away with the knight f5, and here there is a tactical reason for this, because if the knight hadn't moved, let's say he plays maybe g6, well, now we can win tempos. So we play c5, attacking the knight. Now the knight moves, but now we have won a tempo and we can advance further, and now we are threatening the rook. And as you can see, these pawns are getting dangerously close to promoting. So when we see a race like this, where on this side of the board Hikaru is trying to advance his pawns, while on this side of the board Williams is trying to advance these pawns, so there is a race to who gets there first. You don't want to speed up your opponent's plan. So this is why Hikaru plays knight f5, and we see c6 anyways. Oh, sorry. And this is why in this position Hikaru plays knight f5. We see the pawn advance anyway, but now it is without tempo, allowing knight e7 to be played. Now the knight can participate in the defense, so this is called prophylaxis. Hikaru sees what Williams' plan is, and then he start to defend against it before it is allowed to develop too far. See, king e2, and you could have argued that this is kind of a meek move and that c6 would have been more ambitious here, but we allow some plays for inaccuracies, as this is only a 3-minute game. Okay, we see the exchange, and now we have a 2-1 pawn majority over here. So it is looking quite good for white. There is an exchange, and the knight plays to d5. It has been on this square quite a few times now. Of course, it is threatening a check here, which would fork king and rook, and also attack this pawn. This is allowed, but it's not, the check is not working now. Let's see, because we have king d3, and now this doesn't work because there is the check, and this rook will die. So this shows that Simon Williams is a grandmaster, because small tactics like this, he's not going to miss that. So the king moves out of the way, so now he is threatening that check, and it is allowed again. The pawn is defended, and why isn't the check taken? Okay, let's see if after rook here we play the check. We still have king d3. If we try to take the pawn, now we take this pawn with check. Okay, the king has very few squares because he can't go here, so he has to go back, and now it works again. It's the same, exactly the same tactic. So this is what Nimzowitsch, a very famous chess player and also chess thinker, he was one of the first to really put into words what the Grandmasters were doing when they were playing. He calls this a ghost variation. So it's a ghost of a similar variation that you have calculated before. So it's the same theme. So you can utilize that you've already seen this pattern, and in that way you can save time and energy. Alright, enough of the tactics. The pawn is protected, and now king d3, because now the check would finally work. So the king advances, he plays a bigger role in the game, and also the check is no longer possible. And these two pawns were very dangerous, so Hikaru trades it off. And now also, yes, there are two pawns against one, but this one pawn is very effective in stopping both of them now. So a very good decision by Hikaru. So Hikaru centralizes his king, gets the king active, and if we take a look at this position, then we can see, okay, there are these two pawns. As we've noticed, they are blockaded by this pawn. So you could argue that they are not very strong, but it's a weakness that black has to defend all the time. Because if this rook is allowed to take, then this pawn will be very close to queening. Okay. On the other side of the board, we see this 4-3 majority. But it is very clear that this rook is pinning this rook down to protecting this pawn. So arguably this majority over here, even though it is seemingly sufficiently blockaded, is quite a lot stronger, since this rook is reduced to passivity. Now this is the core of the position. This is the result of every single strategical decision from both players throughout the game. And now the quality of this position is an expression of the quality of the strategical decisions. And while Nakamura has tried to make a tactical onslaught and whirlwind his opponent, Simon Williams, the Ginger GM, has tried to keep it simple and slowly build an advantage, incrementally putting one small grain of sand onto another grain of sand, onto another grain of sand, until he has a pile. Maybe you know this philosophical question. You know, how many grains of sand do you need to make a pile? When does it become a pile? And in chess you can say, how many small advantages do you need before you have a winning position? It's fun stuff to think about. Anyways, this game is good for white, but it is still a task to win it. And we will see a lot of shuffling around of pieces in order to create the passed pawn. Let's see how they go about doing that. Okay, he tries to improve his king, help protect the pawns, and also keep black's king away. Now Nakamura advances. He is of course trying to create his own passed pawn. The rook goes down. It can do so freely because this rook kinda looks a little stupid here. Now it's just looking at this pawn, so he'll have to spend an entire move to get into the game. It can, however, do this with the tempo, since this is check to the king. Right? The king moves over. It is now close to its own pawns, and as you can see, the king is taking away this square, this pawn is taking away this square, and this pawn is taking away this square, effectively shielding the black king and holding him out of the game. Not out of the game, but rather away from these crucial pawns. Alright? Nakamura continues his advancement on the queen side. We throw this little check. It's a kind of a typical Grandmaster thing. You'll see they'll be throwing a check, and you know, why is he actually doing that? You can ask yourself. Well, he is just slightly improving his position by saying, okay, you have to move your king back, and now I'm going where I want to with my rook, but you have he's forcing his opponent to kind of waste a move. Okay, the rook goes over here because Nakamura realizes that it is very passive to defend from behind, but if he defends from the side like this, he will still be able to be active in this direction. Small nuances, but this kind of position is all about the small nuances. Alright, the pawn is attacked. Of course it has to be protected. And again we see this idea of forcing the rook into a passive position and then trying to do something else with your own rook. Now Nakamura tries to improve his king. He's realized, okay, I cannot get over to the two blockaded pawns, so instead I will try to help my own pawns get rid of these defenders down here. Okay. Now Simon Williams improves his own rook because he wants, of course, to get this rook shielded. So he's maybe thinking of going here, so he'll shield this defense. Obviously he wouldn't be able to take, because then could be captured here, but it's an idea that's in the position. And centralization of the king. And we see the first exchange of pawns. Still looks kind of balanced, everything. But you can see white moves with a little more tempo. He is asking the questions. He is forcing black's hands. And that is the result of all this incremental strategical, all these incremental strategical decisions that have had just slightly higher quality throughout the game than his opponents. Now Nakamura tries to get active with his own rook, but of course he is leaving, so there might be a cost to this. And indeed, after this exchange of pawns, now it is kind of hard to get back to protect this pawn. Alright, Nakamura uses these checks very cleverly. We see a little bit of a repetition before the king tries to get in, but it's too late. Now this position probably still can be saved, but it requires super accurate play. Nakamura throws a check. We see a little bit more of a repetition, and here he takes the last pawn. And that was greedy. That was one step too far. He was trying to win this game. He should have tried to draw, because there is no way that he is going to win unless Simon Williams makes a mistake now. So this was greedy, but okay. He is expected to win because he is so much higher rated, and he, you don't become the champion by not trying to win. But it is very, very hard now. The rook goes here because queens are good. So we see these checks again. And so of course the rook is trying to come in and protect, but you can see this is not very fun for black. The king comes in. You need the king. You need every single resource you have. And now it's just a matter of technique. I'll show the rest of the game. More like the game is of course decided by now, but it's interesting to see how desperate a top 10 player can actually be when he doesn't want to lose, because when you see this next move, you'll think, that he's a complete beginner, because he just puts his rook in Angpri so it can be taken. He was actually trying to win on time, because Simon Williams was down to his very last seconds here, and that is why because if, for instance, we see queens here, he was hoping that that something like this would happen, and white is still winning. But it could, if Simon Williams had maybe pre-moved this move or something. But no, he was quite cool-headed, just took the rook. And here he also made like a little funny decision. He actually took this pawn. Now why did he do that? That's because he was down to, I think, 2 seconds at this point. And if your opponent has pieces that allows him to, in principle, checkmate, and you lose on time, you will lose the game. But if he doesn't have pieces so that he could never checkmate you, no matter how long time he has, if you lose on time, then it's a draw. So after he gives up this rook for the pawn, he cannot lose the game anymore. Now it can only become a draw. So it's sort of a safety measure. And one queen, check, check. And queens are good. Let's have some more of those. Check. And he's not bothering with trying out to figure out like what the fastest checkmate is. He is doing whatever every beginner would also do. He is doing the stairs check, because of course you see how these are kind of building stairs, and that's it. That is checkmate. So the Ginger GM, the massive underdog, the awesome Simon Williams, beat Hikaru Nakamura in what I think was a quite instructive game. Now, wouldn't it be awesome if you could see this game narrated while it was being played by the Ginger GM himself? Well, you actually can, because this game was from a live stream and it is on his YouTube channel. Just click here and it will take you right to him. And if you do, please say hi from me. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I wish you all a very nice day.